All right, so Yevamos. I have that we're starting at Beis Zion. You're starting there,
Well,
correct?
okay. No, let's start on Tes Zayin Aleph.
Okay. Tes Zion Aleph. A woman whose husband and co-wife went overseas, and they came back and said to her, "Your husband died, may not marry or be taken in Yibum until she knows if her co-wife is pregnant. If she had a mother-in-law, she need not concern herself. However, if she departed while pregnant, she must concern herself." Rabbi Yeshua says she need not consider it.
Right, so this is an important consideration over here. We're going to do a little bit more eon on the Chazara here because because we didn't get a chance to have share yesterday. But basically, permitting a woman to marry her yavam is a big deal, because if it's a mistake, that's a kares and the child's going to be a mamzer.
Right. Right.
Okay, so when there's a reasonable doubt that she had a co-wife and her husband went overseas with a co-wife, so they need to check if the co-wife is pregnant before she's allowed to remarry. But if what happens? So the shayla is, what happens if she goes overseas with her, if her husband goes overseas with his mother? Okay, and now the thing is that mother and father, let's say not his mother and father, but if he had no brothers, and they come back with a report that he's died, is she allowed to remarry without checking that? Well, maybe his mother gave birth to a boy, and now she's got a yavam.
Now she's got to wait.
Which prevents her from marrying.
She's got to wait until he's old enough.
And then she would have to wait until he's old enough. Exactly.
Right.
Okay. So the Mishnah says that is not a chashash. It's not typically going to be true that we don't have to be worried that maybe the mother-in-law is going to give birth to a son in between, but if she went overseas pregnant, then that's a chashash. If her mother-in-law went overseas pregnant, and it's possible that there's a son coming that's been born to her, now that's a real chashash. Now Rabbi Yeshua says it's not such a chashash. Why? Because he's got a sveika. He says there's a suffix. Did she carry to term or did she not carry to term? Maybe she miscarried. And even if you say that she didn't miscarry, maybe she gave birth to a girl. Right? So that he says is a sveika, and the Chacham said that's not enough of a sveika. It isn't so much such a suffix did she carry. Anyway,
it's pretty unreasonable of Beis Din to say you have to wait until this kid's old enough. It could be 10 years, 11, 12 years.
No, it's not reasonable. We're not talking about the reasonability of waiting for the kid to grow up. It's the reasonability of the assumption of the supposition that maybe a child is born, which changes her status for Yibum.
Right.
Okay. And some doubts are reasonable doubt. Like, for example, is her co-wife pregnant? If her co-wife is pregnant, then there's no yibum. Right? All that. Well, at least as long as she can carry to term and give birth to a viable child, right, then there's no yibum. Okay.
Where do we have that? We have that pasuk in the Torah where someone says, I can't remember which one it was now. The woman says, "Do you expect me to wait until this boy grows up?"
Yes, that was Tamar.
Right.
Yeah, it was Tamar with the she saw that Shayla had grown up, and that she wasn't being given a yibum, and that's when she did a whole subterfuge with Yehuda.
Right. Okay. Base. If there were two sisters-in-laws and each one stated, "My husband died," each one is prohibited to marry because of the other's husband. If one had witnesses but the other did not, the one with witnesses prohibited to marry, whereas the one without witnesses is permitted. If one had children but the other did not, the one with children is permitted to marry, whereas the one without children is prohibited. If they were taken in Yibum and the Yavam then died, they are prohibited from remarrying. But Elazar says, since they were permitted to the Yavam, they are permitted to all men.
Okay, so let's just dive into this because this is an interesting case here. Okay, so the two sisters-in-law, they married to two brothers. They're not related to each other. But each one comes back and says, my husband is dead. So if you had to take their testimonies together, you would say, okay, well, my husband is dead and my brother-in-law is dead, therefore we should each be allowed to remarry. But because they are sisters-in-law, they're classed as rivals. So they're not believed regarding each other. They're believed regarding themselves. They're not believed regarding each other. So when each one says, yes, yes, my husband is dead, we have to say, well, we have to be choshesh that maybe the brother is alive. So we have a symmetry between them that neither of them can remarry until we establish with witnesses that one of the brothers is dead. Now
we had that in the Mishnah before, where you can't, the brother, the sister, and the brother-in-law, and the brother-in-law. There's one of them, the mother-in-law, and
Right, that's right, exactly. So who are the rivals? Okay, so now let's say one of them brings witnesses and says, yes, my husband, I've got witnesses here, 2 witnesses who say that my husband is dead. Oh, great, that's very nice. So now we have proof positive. So let's take our women as A and B. Okay, woman A comes and says my husband is dead. Woman B comes and says my husband is dead, and the 2 husbands are brothers. Okay, so woman A comes and says, but I've got witnesses that my husband is dead. And woman B says, thank you very much, because now my testimony is accepted about my own husband, and your witnesses are accepted as testimony about his brother. Therefore, woman B is allowed to remarry. But woman A can't remarry because we haven't got any proof positive that husband B is dead. Okay, so that's a bit of an irony that the one who's got the witnesses is not allowed to remarry. Okay. If one of them has sons and the other one doesn't have sons, okay, the one who's got children, she's allowed to remarry because she's out the parsha of Yevamos. She doesn't care whether there's a brother-in-law or not. Okay, but the one who doesn't have children, she's not allowed to marry until there's proof that the Yavam is dead. If they actually now comes another situation. Let's say there are brothers. There are 2 more brothers who are in the story. And each of them takes one of the women in Yibum. Okay. Now, what happens if these other brothers also die now? But they died. So we didn't know what happened. We didn't have complete clarity about A and B, because A and B we only permitted the widows to be taken in Yibum because the women themselves said that their husbands were dead. Okay. But we didn't have any proof that they were really dead. Okay. Now, the Yevamim died, and now they've fallen again for Yibum because there's still these Safek brothers alive over there, and they say no, they're still not allowed to remarry, because we've rolled back to the situation where they've fallen for Yibum again, and we still don't know if the brothers are alive or not. Rabbi Elazar Omer Hoel v'huchu l'Yevamim. He disagrees. He says no. Once they've been permitted to the Yevamim, the story starts again. They're now married to these brothers. We've accepted the testimony enough to let them remarry the Yevamim, and now when the Yevamim die, they're free to go because if they're no more brothers. Okay, but this is not the halacha. Although the fact is that if the Yevamim, that even Rabbi Elazar would even the Chachamim would agree that in the case where the Yavam divorced her or he had children and before he died, that now that they're the widows of a Yavam where there's no parsha of Yibum, it's okay. They can remarry. They don't have to. They're now out of the parsha of Yibum, and it doesn't matter whether the other brothers are alive or not. Okay, don't forget more.
Okay, one may only testify that a man is dead if he saw the face and nose, even if there are identifying marks on the body or clothing. Excuse me. One may testify only that a man is dead if he actually saw him dead, but not if he saw him cut, hanging, or being devoured by wild beasts. One may only testify if he saw the body within 3 days. Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba says, not all men or areas or times are alike.
Right, so this is how to identify a dead body. Okay, you can only have positive identification of a dead body from seeing the face, including the nose. It was an interesting exercise based on this Mishna. One time when we had a shul outing, and and I was organizing a game for the children. I organized a little treasure hunt where I gave the children partial photographs of people's faces, and they had to go and find that person and the treasure and get the next clue from them. And so I would take like an eye, or I would take a mouth or whatever, and a little section of the faces. Yeah, and if I put a little bit of the nose and the mouth, right, then immediately the kids got it. But like an eye without the nose, they couldn't. It was much more difficult. So it was the nose was what gave it away every time. I did that little experiment to see how quickly they could do it. There's no question about it. The nose is the most identifying feature of a person, even above their eyes.
Right.
So that was an interesting little exercise. Okay. Mishna Daled, Nafal Lamayim. If a person fell into water and did not resurface, whether you can see the end of the water, or not, right? So if, for example, it's a small lake and you can see all the shores, or if you fell into the sea and you cannot see the horizon, it doesn't make a difference. This is the opinion, by the way, of Rabbi Meir. He says it doesn't matter whether you can see the shoreline or you can't see the shoreline. Ishto Asora, we have to suspect that he surfaced somewhere, swam to shore, found somewhere through. You can't testify that he's dead if you didn't see his body. Okay, just because he disappeared at sea doesn't mean he's dead.
Right.
Okay. Amar Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir brings a proof to his words. There was once a case of a guy who fell into a deep well. And he came out after 3 days. Somehow he managed to survive, and he resurfaced after 3 days. So he says you can't rely on it. Even though it's a bore has got a shoreline. You could have seen him if he would have come out, but this guy came out 3 days later, more than 3 days later. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi disagrees with him. He says, we had another Maaseh where a blind man went into a mikveh in a cave with his helper. The Yarad Moshko Acharab, and his helper went in with him. And obviously some mishap happened. And they fell into the water, and nobody could see them, and nobody could fish them out. And after they'd spent so much time inside the cave that it was not possible for them to have survived, Hisiyun Nashosem. The Chachamim gave permission for their wives to remarry. So they lost their, and we're talking here, of course, about a cave where there's no way out. If you're sitting and watching and you're hoping that these guys are going to manage to come out, and the rescue divers can't find them, okay, they said it's fair enough to assume that they are dead.
This next case is very strange.
Okay. So there was another case in the place called Asya. So there was a guy who they lowered into the sea.
George.
And they pulled out only his leg. If his leg was chopped off below the knee, above the knee, right? Tinaseh, then the woman can remarry, because that is called a fatal injury. If he's lost his leg at that point, then he's not going to survive. Okay, Tinaseh, but they said in between the lines we see that they only permitted her to marry after 12 months because that it's a fatal injury, but it's not necessarily a fatal injury that's going to kill him immediately. So the presumption is that he would not survive more than a year, and that was how long they said that they could take she should wait before she could remarry. Minhar kuva ulamata, but if it was bitten off below the knee, lotina say that's not a raya. He could have survived losing just a foot, and therefore we have to suspect that he is still alive. Okay, Mishna hey. So even if a person hears that the women are chatting among each other and they're saying, "Did you hear that Ploni died?" a witness heard them talking about this, and then he traveled back to another city, and he heard, and he says, oh, I heard in this other city that that Ploni had died. That's enough. That's enough to permit his wife to remarry. Remember, the Chachamim were very, very makil on trying to find a heter for a woman to remarry, because the situation of Agona is not a pleasant one. Again, with the double-edged sword, that the woman is going to have to do her own research. It's on her responsibility that she's going to remarry, because if it turns out that they're wrong, she's going to be paying the penalties. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, "Afilu shema min hatinokos omrim, harei anu holchim lisbod v'likbor es ish ploni." Even if he has little children saying, "Oh, we're going to the funeral of Ploni," then that's enough. That's enough testimony for him to go and release the wife. And it doesn't matter whether they're having intention to testify that yes, Fred is dead, or they're just sort of talking the fitumah. That's they just happen to be having a chat and say, oh, last week, Fred died, poor guy, and that's and they're not intending to testify. Either way is acceptable, says Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava Omer b'Yisrael achi hemiskaven. It's that with a Jew, he must have intention to be testifying, says Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. Of a goy, and if it's a non-Jew, and if a non-Jew was intending to testify, then we do not accept him, because we suspect that he may be giving deliberately false information in order to mess up a Jewish family. But if a goy is mesiach lepitumo, if a goy just happens to be passing time of day and say, yeah, I saw this terrible accident yesterday, and this guy, they told that his name was whatever, he was killed in it. So if he doesn't realize that his words have got legal import, then that's acceptable. There's actually an amendment in the Gemara, and the version of the Mishna that's in the Gemara actually is different, which changed the word of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava to say with the Yisrael afilu miskaven, which means that a Jew's testimony is acceptable. He's not disagreeing about a Jew with the Tanakama. He's saying it doesn't matter if a Jew is intending or not intending. It's a valid, then we can rely on his word, but he is disagreeing about a non-Jew, and the halacha follows that a non-Jew's testimony is only acceptable if he doesn't realize it has legal import. We had a similar thing, if you remember, when we were doing kashrus, that when the mechaber was saying you're not sure, you had some milk fell into the meat pot. Mm-hmm. And you wanted to ask a non-Jew, tell me, do you think there's a milky taste in the soup? If he realizes that you're asking him because of the kashrus of the situation, you can't rely on him, says the mechaber. You can't rely on him because he's got his interest is in messing you up. Right. Okay. But if you somehow get him to taste it and ask him, and he doesn't realize that it's that you're asking because of halacha, and say, what do you think of the flavor of this soup? And he says, it's a nice soup. And he says, yeah, it does taste, it's sort of creamy flavor. I said, no, not creamy. Oh, where'd you get creamy from? It's a good chicken soup. And so you can't taste it. Great, excellent. Right. And then so this is the mechaber, you could rely on it. We pass into halacha that we don't even rely on the pele in such a situation, but again, that's one of those situations where we can rely on a non-Jew's testimony only if he doesn't realize. Rabbi
Yehuda says here that even if children are saying I'm going to a funeral, can you rely on them, or they're not old enough to give testimony then?
That's right. So that's the extent of the heter, is that even a non-kosher witness is relied on in this respect, that you have the children saying, poor Fred, he's such a nice guy, always used to give out candies and shul.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And furthermore, you don't even have to have daylight to identify the corpse. Okay? It can be candlelight or moonlight. You can even allow a widow to remarry by a baskol. Now, normally a baskol is a heavenly voice, but I don't think that's what they meant. Right. The situation over here. We're talking about a distant voice. if you hear like a distant cry saying, "Oi, Fred is dead!" Oi, and you know, and it's like it's clear enough, but it's far. You don't even know who's saying it. And there's a Maaseh of this. Maaseh ve'echad she'amad al rosh hahar ve'amar ish ploni ben ploni mimakom ploni meis. So they heard this announcement and they went up to see what it was. Halchu v'lo matzu sham Adam. But they went and didn't find anyone there. They see Ishto, and even that they used as basis to allow his wife to remarry. Which is funny because it could be his mother, it could be the mother-in-law who's trying to mess up her daughter-in-law, and she's got up and said this. But okay, that's what the Mishnah says. The Shuv Maaseh b'Talmon. There was another case in a place called Talmon. Be'echad she'amar ani ish ploni ben ish ploni neshachani nachash. Help me! I've been bitten by a snake. And he calls out his name, right? I'm dying. So they came and they found this guy. He died from the snake bite, and because of the poison, his face was so contorted that nobody could recognize him.
So
but nonetheless, because he had said his own name before he died, they allowed his wife to remarry. So we see at Kadekaf, there's a great will to allow a woman to remarry on the flimsiest of evidence. Again, with that double-edged sword, that she has to be certain herself, and because she's really putting her money where her mouth is.
She's responsible.
She's responsible, and if anything goes wrong, she's gonna take all the consequences. Okay, Yud Gimel Yud Beis.
When we finish Yevamos, where are we going after that?
Kesivos.
Super. Okay.
Yeah, that'll be tomorrow.
That makes sense. You said Yud Gimel. You said Yud Gimel?
Yud Gimel Yud Beis.
I have a different spot. Oh wait, no, no. Too many tissues. Okay. Just took the tissue out of that spot. Okay. Yud Gimel Yud Beis. Okay. If a minor Yavam cohabitated with a minor Yevama, they must wait for each other to grow up. If he cohabitated with an adult Yevama, she must wait for him to grow up. If a Yevama stated within 30 days, he did not cohabitate with me, we coerce him into perform Kalitza with her. If she stated this after 30 days, we request of him that he perform Kalitza with her. However, if he admits to it, then even after 12 months, we coerce him to perform Kalitza with her. If a woman vowed not to derive benefits from a Yavam, if she vowed so during her husband's lifetime, we coerce him to perform Kalitza with her. If she avowed so after her husband's death, we request of him that he perform Kalitza with her. However, if she intended this, then even if she avowed during her husband's lifetime, we only request of him that he perform Kalitza with her. If a deaf-mute man married a competent woman, or a competent man married a deaf-mute woman, if he wishes, he may divorce her, and if he wishes, he may retain her. Just as he marries by gesturing, so may he divorce her by gesturing. If a competent man married a competent woman, and she became a deaf-mute, if he wishes, he may divorce her, and if he wishes, he may retain her. If she became insane, he may not divorce her. If he became a deaf-mute or insane, he can never divorce her. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri asked, why is that a wife who became deaf-mute may be divorced, but a husband who became a deaf-mute may not divorce? They replied, a husband who divorces is not comparable to a wife who is divorced, since a wife may be divorced with or without her consent, while a husband cannot divorce except by his consent. Okay, good?
Okay, yeah, base sign.
Okay. See here. Zion. Oh, and the other one. Okay, I took the tissue out, so that wasn't good. Here we are. Okay. Two men who betrothed two sisters, and neither one knows which one he has betrothed. Each of them gives two divorces. If they divide and each left a brother, each performs Kalitza with both. If one left one brother and the other left two brothers, and the single brother performs Kalitza with both, and of the two, one performs Kalitza and the other one may then perform Yibum. However, if they went ahead and married them, we do not force them to divorce. If each left two brothers, A brother of one performs chalitza with one of the sisters, and a brother of the other performs chalitza with the other sister. Then the two remaining brothers may each perform yibum with the widow who received chalitza from the other's brother. If both went ahead and performed chalitza, the other two may not perform yibum, but one may perform chalitza with the other and may then perform yibum. However, if they went ahead and married them, we do not force them to divorce. The commandment is for the eldest to perform yibum, but if the youngest anticipated him, he gains it. One who is suspected in connection with a slave woman, and she was then freed, or in connection with a non-Jewish woman, and she then converted, may not marry her. But if he did marry her, we do not force him to divorce her. One who is suspected in connection with another man's wife, and they compelled him to divorce her, even if he married her, he must divorce her. Okay. One who brings a bill of divorce from overseas and says, if it was written before one and signed before me, I'm sorry, I was wrong. If it was written before me and signed before me, may not marry the wife. If he declares he died, I killed him, we killed him, he may not marry the wife. If Yehuda says, if he declares I killed him, his wife may not marry. We killed him, his wife may marry. Good. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yoma. Okay. Vav Zion. He came to the ox and the he-goat, which were to be burned. He tore them and removed their sacrificial parts. He put them in a plate and burned them upon the outer altar. He intertwined the limbs of the ox and the he-goat into twists and removed them to the place of burning. And from when do these people contaminate clothing? From when they go outside the wall of the courtyard. Reb Shimon says, from when the fire catches onto the greater part of the limbs. They said to the Kohen Gadol, the he-goat has reached the wilderness. And how did they know that the he-goat had reached the wilderness? They set up watch posts and waved cloths, and thus they knew that the he-goat had reached the wilderness. Rabbi Yehuda said that they had a dependable signal from Jerusalem to the place of the he-goat's sharp peak was 3 mil. And they walked a mil, returned a mil, and tarried for the time needed to walk a mil. Thus they knew that the he-goat had reached the wilderness. Rabbi Ishmael says, but they did not have another sign. Did they not have another sign? A strip of red wool was tied atop the temple entrance. And when the he-goat reached the wilderness, the strip of wool whitened. As it had been said, even if your sins will be like crimson thread, they will become white as snow. The Kohen Gadol came to read. If he wished to read wearing his linen vestments, he may read. And if not, he would read while wearing his own white robe. The attendant of the synagogue takes a Torah scroll and gives it to the head of the synagogue. The head of the synagogue gives it to the deputy Kohen Gadol, and the deputy gives it to the Kohen Gadol. And the Kohen Gadol stands up, accepts the scroll, and reads while standing. He reads from Akwemos in the portion that begins, but on the 10th. And then he rolls up the Torah scroll, puts it in his bosom, and says, more than I have read to you is written here. And he recites by heart from the book of Numbers, beginning on the 10th. Then he recites over it 8 benedictions for the Torah, for the sacrificial service, for the thanksgiving, for the forgiving of sins, for the temple separately, for Israel separately, for Yerushalayim separately, and for the Kohen separately, and for the rest of the prayer. Okay. One who sees that was it, right? That was it. Okay. Okay. Trumos. Okay. Gimel Hay. If one says the truma of the sheep is within it, and its maestros are within it, the truma's maestros is within it. Reb Shimon says he has designated, but the sages say not unless he says in the north or in the south of it. Reb Eliezer Hisma says if one says the truma of the heap from it is for it, and he has designated it. And Reb Eliezer ben Yaakov says if one says the 10th of this maestros is truma's maestros for it, he has designated it. If one separates Truma before Bikurim, Maisa Rishon before Teruma, and Maisa Sheni before Maisa Rishon, though he has transgressed the prohibition, what he did is done, since it is stated, you shall not delay to offer the abundance of your fruits and of your liquors. And whence do we know that Bikurim must precede Truma? This is called Truma Erishit, and it's called Truma Reshit, rather. Bikurim takes precedence because they are the first fruits of all, And Truma takes precedence because there's a Reshit, and Mises Rishon precedes Rishon Sheni because it contains Reshit. I messed that up pretty well. Okay. If one intended to say Truma,
that's 3.
Okay. You don't want to hear any more of that one. Okay, I messed it up.
Okay, Olas Gimel Hay.
Okay. What qualifies as death blood? An eighth of a log of blood flowed out of a dying person while he was still alive, and an eighth flowed out after he died. These are the words of Rabbi Akiva. Ishmael says a quarter log of blood that flowed out while the person was alive, and a quarter log that flowed out after his death were combined, and from his mixture a quarter log was taken. From Eliezer says, the son of Rabbi Yehuda says, both of these are like water. What is death blood? When there is a hanged person whose blood was flowing out of him, a quarter log of blood was found beneath him. The blood is tamei. But if the corpse's blood was dripping and a quarter log of blood was found underneath it, the blood is tahor. Rabbi Yehuda says, not so. Rather, that which flows out is tahor, and that which drips is tamei. I noticed in this, and I don't think if this is a language thing, a Hebrew thing. You notice in Hay where it says what qualifies as death blood, and then it says an eighth of a log of blood. If I can find, all right. Then it says Rabbi Yishmael says a quarter log. You see that in there?
Yeah.
Now in English they have, and I in all my schooling I never saw this before. A quarter log bracket minus the word log. Why did they have the minus there? I can't figure out why that is there. If you were looking at
I
English,
don't understand. You'll have to show me the page. I don't know what to.
I don't know if you can see it here. It's the bottom line over here. I don't know if you can see it at all. You probably can't see it.
Quarter log. Because they don't explicitly say the word log in the Mishnah. So they're saying that in square brackets that's implied. It's a rova. Rova means rova just means a quarter. But what they're explaining is that it's a quarter log that we're referring to.
I couldn't figure out why the minus was there. I just said, why the.
I think it's a hyphen. It's a hyphen.
It's a hyphen. Yeah, it's I never saw that in English like that. So this. Have you ever seen it in English like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a quarter log. If you'd written quarter log, you would have written quarter dash log.
Yeah, okay, I can understand that.
So if log is implicit, then they put the square brackets around dash log.
I see. Okay. Thank you. Figure out what that was. Okay. All right. Fine. All right. Here we are. Okay, here we go. An olive-sized piece of corpse in a room must have an opening of 1 handbreadth, and a whole corpse must have an opening of 4 handbreadths to prevent tumor from spreading to the other openings. But to allow tumor to spread, 1 square handbreadth suffices. If it is larger than the volume of an olive, it is treated as a whole corpse. Rabbi Yossi says a spinal column and a skull are treated like a whole corpse. A cavity 1 handbreadth by 1 handbreadth squared, that is 1 handbreadth high, conveys tumor and acts as a barrier against tumor. How so? In the case of a sewer beneath a house that contains a cubic handbreadth and has an outlet of a square handbreadth, if there is tumor inside the sewer, the house remains tahor. If there is tumor in the house, whatever is inside the sewer remains tahor, because it is the way of the tumor to exit, but it is not its way to enter. In the case where a sewer contains a cubic handbreadth or its outlet is smaller than a square handbreadth, if there is tumor inside the sewer, the house becomes tamei, and if there is tumor in the house, whatever is inside the sewer remains tahor, because it is the way of tumor to exit, but is not the way of tumor to enter. In the case where the sewer is smaller than a cubic handbreadth and its outlet is smaller than a square handbreadth, if there is tumor inside the sewer, the house becomes tamei. If there is tumor in the house, wherever it is inside, the sewer becomes tamei. This law is true whether the hole was hollowed out by water, by small animals, or by erosion, and is also true if it is formed by a pile of boulders or a stack of beams. Rabbi Yehuda says any roof that is not man-made is not considered an ohel. However, he agrees with respect to crags and projecting rock formations that they are considered ha'olam.
So the way to view the tumor in an ohel is you look at tumor as this invisible fluid that
Mhm.
that wants to escape. So it needs. So in order for it to escape, it has to have an escape route. It wants to get out, right? Derech haTshuma latzeit v'lo leikanes. It wants to get out. So everything between where it is and the escape route is tameh under that roof. But if it's further indoors, then it's not. Okay, as long as there's an escape route. But if there's no escape route, then the tumor is going to fill up the space that it's in. So if it's inside if tumor's inside a back room of the house and there's no way for it to escape other than through the rest of the house, and the rest of the house is going to be tameh. But if it's got a window open, then the tumor can go out through that window, and the rest of the house is fine.
If it was the top of the house and there's a roof right above it, it would go out through the roof.
No, but the roof closes it. You've got to have an opening. You have to have an opening for the tumor to go out.
Open for it to go out, right? Because that's the way that tumor works. It doesn't come in that way, right?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Idios. Base Zion. So that's wrong.
That's right.
Base Zion.
That's fine.
Okay, base Zion. There are three things that the disciples stated before Rabbi Akiva. Two of the things they said in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, and one of them they said in the name of Rabbi Shua. There were two things they said in the name of Rabbi Eliezer were, a woman may go out with a city of gold on Shabbos, and pigeon flyers are unfit for testimony. And the one thing said to Rabbi Akiva in the name of Rabbi Shua was, if a sheretz was in the mouth of a weasel, and the weasel was walking over some loaves of truma, so that there is a doubt whether the sheretz touched the truma or did not touch it, the doubt is ru'u tahor. Rabbi Akiva stated three things concerning two of the two Chachamim agreed with him, and concerning one that did not agree with him. Concerning a lime worker's sandal, the sages agree that it is susceptible to tumah of midras. And the sages also agree with Rabbi Akiva concerning the remnants of an oven, but they must be at least 4 tefachim in size. And for the sages used to say that the 3 tefachim was sufficient, but they conceded to Rabbi Akiva. And concerning one, they did not agree with him, namely concerning a chair from which 2 of its seat slats were removed, one next to the other, which Rabbi Akiva declares susceptible to tumah contamination, but the Chachamim declare it not susceptible to tumah contamination. He used to say, a father merits a son with beauty, with physical strength, material wealth, with wisdom in Torah, and with years. And regarding the number of generations that is before him, for that is the time set by him. As it is stated, he proclaimed the generations from the beginning. For although it is stated with regard to the redemption from Egypt, and then will serve them, and then will oppress them 400 years, it is also stated, and the 4th generation shall return here. Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day. Did you start saying Tachlin today? You start saying Tachlin today?
No,
not till you'd base, right?
not until next month, and not until
Yeah.